All right, students, what's up? How are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you guys are all doing well and hanging in there, especially if you're getting ready to take the July ACT. If you're not, that's totally cool as well. We want to make sure that we can answer all of your questions no matter what. So again, just make sure that you guys have questions to ask us. We're here for you. We want to make sure that you guys are as ready to go for the July test or the September test or whatever it is whichever test you're going to take. We don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed or anxious or anything stressed like that. So if you guys have any general questions before we get started here, please let me know. Just text or chat. If you guys don't have the chat feature open, you should have to. I think you have to subscribe to the YouTube channel in order for that to happen. So subscribe, and then you'll see a chat feature in the top right-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner where you guys can ask me questions. And then joining us today, and thrilled to have her. We have a teaching assistant, Sarah. She's online as well. And she is, for some of you that haven't been in the classroom or specific classroom programs where Sarah is the teaching assistant, Sarah's here to help answer questions as well and just kind of drive the live stream in the right direction, just so we don't get too far off track with different questions. So Sarah is a perfect score on the ACT. She did it very recently, within the last 2 or 3 years. So she is probably more familiar as I get older. She's probably more familiar what it's like to be a high school student taking this relatively recently, and so she can definitely help you guys. Guys, if you guys have any questions, if your test got canceled, one of the things that we continue to say is to make sure that you control what you can control, right? We've talked a lot about that in past videos, okay? We've talked a lot about that in past videos. Make sure that you control what you can control. If your test got canceled for July, everybody knows that this is a very weird time, right? It's crazy, hectic. I know students. I know certain testing locations were canceled like up until yesterday, and probably going to get canceled again today. So it's just one of those things that just makes it such a nightmare for you guys. I don't want to say give the ACT any credit or too much credit, but one of the things, I'm sure they want you guys to have the test as well. I mean, it's going to be just a crazy time in September and October. So just, as you call in, they'll try to get it worked out, but make sure that if you guys have any questions regarding the cancellations, that you guys at least reach out to them in some capacity, whether that be an email or just some capacity. Even if you don't get an immediate response, at least then it's documented that you've sent out that inquiry, and you can always reference that. On top of that, guys, can everybody just give me a thumbs up if you guys are watching? Can you guys just give me a thumbs up so that we know that you're here, that you're ready to go? And then if anybody has any general questions before we get started here, if anybody has any general questions, feel free to ask those now. And then we will get started with some review. We'll talk a lot about the scale tonight. Basically, the way that this is going to go in terms of the structure of the live stream tonight, we're going to do, or today, I guess, this afternoon, we're going to do a review of the scale and how to set a good goal score for yourself. Okay? And then we're going to, goal score, and then we're going to go through the 4 sections, like probably 15 minutes on the scale, another hour and 15 minutes or so on each of the 4, hour and 15 minutes total on the 4 sections, and just kind of a general review. And then we'll open it up for questions again afterwards. I will say this, though, that if you guys have general questions, either save them for the end or save them for the time that we get to that specific test section, right? So if we're talking about math, try not to ask questions about the reading section. We'll get there, but just so that we can, again, as Sarah's going to help us try to stay on track here, but just so we can stay relatively structured and formatted as we move through this stuff. Okay? So again, guys, the purpose of today's class. Okay, the purpose of let's see. So before we get started, let me just see some general questions. Yeah, any additional advice? So actually who was that? Guys, so regarding the comments about the reading section, definitely have some comments about that. So let's let me talk about that a little bit. So let's start with the reading. Let me just talk about the scale, because the question about reading and staying calm, one of the things that it was kind of a revelation to me just recently on how, in terms of additional advice, particularly as it applies to to the reading and the science sections. So guys, the first thing that we'll start out with, I back it up just a second just because I maybe go into a little bit too quickly, but what we want to start out with is talking about the scale and how this test really works. Because if you don't talk about the scale, then it's hard to understand how different the scoring is and how hard to understand how different this test is scored than something that you'd see in school. So in terms of the reading section and the reading mentality, one of the things that we continue to recommend to all of our students in all of our classroom programs is this idea of setting a goal score based on the number of questions you want to answer correctly. And this goes for Saturday especially, not based on this mythical score figure, right? Because everybody thinks about this test as like, oh, somebody got a 36. My friend got a 36 on the ACT. And it's almost as if it's become, and I don't know how this happened, but it's almost as if this has become like there must be some secret recipe that gets me to that 36. But in reality, and this is again particularly true of the last three sections, in reality, we're talking about, so if we get 59s, right, on the math section, if we look at even these top scores, in reality, this is the 74F reading scale, guys, and I think I posted this test form below as well. Okay, but on the 74F scale, if you're looking at the reading test, if you set a goal score for yourself of 30 questions, right? If going into the reading section or going into whichever section you struggle with the most, that's probably the best way to say it. Whichever section you struggle with the most or where you feel the most anxious, make sure that you set a very, very steady and very strict goal number of questions you want to answer correctly. Because guys, what you'll notice is that a 30 out of 40, right? 30 out of 40 on the reading section, that's a 75% in school. Okay, that's a 75%, which is, you guys got it as C. Okay? So if you guys are looking at a C here, and guys, yeah, so in terms of the scale does change per test, but generally speaking, you can kind of account for 30 questions, right, being somewhere in the goal range of like a 28. Like this is pretty consistent. This science scale is really goofy on the 74F test. That's probably the only one here that's not very reflective of more recent science scales. But other than that, the other three sections are pretty consistent overall, just general knowledge with what you'd see on the real thing. But the reading section score, if you get a C for what would account for a C in school, that would be a 28 on the reading test. And so when you guys watch some of our videos, and we struggle with this from a psychological standpoint of getting students kind of over that hump in terms of understanding how this test is graded, when we say things like only read the first three passages, that's not to say that we don't think that you can answer more questions in the last passage. What we're trying to get at is if you're really accurate, if you take all of the time that you would have spent on the last passage and you apply it to the other three to guarantee that you get 30 questions answered correctly, you're already at a 28. But more importantly, and for those that have watched our videos pretty diligently over the last 2 weeks, if you go from a 30 and you leave the other 10 questions blank, and this is one of the most important things to remember in terms of the ACT scoring, is that you do not get penalized for guessing. And in fact, a lot of our methods are using a strategy that for whatever reason doesn't seem to be implemented in any other program that I've ever seen or ever worked with, yet it makes complete sense from a mathematical standpoint and a scale standpoint. All I'm trying to get you guys to do is to think about this reading test as a 30-question test. And if you think about it as a 30-question test in 35 minutes, right, one that you want to get all of the questions answered correctly, you're guaranteeing yourself a 28 on the reading test, or between a 27 and a 29, depending on the test, right? But somewhere in that range of scores. So again, what would feel like answering 75% of the questions correctly, which doesn't make you necessarily feel great or makes you feel a little anxious probably about the idea that you left so many questions blank, in reality, that would be in the top 10 to 15% of all students that take the reading section. But again, it's like an infomercial, but there's more. And this is where we always start all of our classroom programs, all of our videos, is this scale idea. There's more, right? It's like, you guys are probably too young to remember Billy Mays, but there's that new guy who does the slap chop. If you guys have seen him on TV, right? It's more. It's an infomercial. There's more. If you guys get 30 questions right, okay, if you guys get 30 questions right, and you leave the other 10 questions blank, I don't know why we don't highlight this idea more of that there's no penalty for guessing. So if just from a pure statistical standpoint, like you don't get lucky at all, there's a 2.5 because on the reading section there's 4 answer choices. there's 2.5 out of 10 questions is our expected value for how many questions we're supposed to get right. So that would, let's say that rounds up to a 33, right? If you only answer 75% of the questions, but you feel like you can be accurate on those 75, you are statistically guaranteeing yourself, not a question, it's statistical guaranteeing yourself of getting at least a 31 on the reading section by guessing just the same letter down all the way through the last section of the test. And again, for those that have watched some of our more recent videos, you'll know that those last questions, that guessing letter or guessing column, should be based on whichever answer choice has shown up the least. If you guys watched our math video yesterday, that was a very comprehensive math video. If you guys watched that, you know that I only answered, we filmed a math video where I answered 36 out of 60 questions correctly, only 36, but I was very, very sure, I was sure of my accuracy, or I guess as sure as you can be. And then on the remaining 24 questions, I just guessed, if you guys can hear my dog in the background, that's my dog. I just guessed 24 questions in a row. I just guessed the answer choice D, J, all the way down after looking at my answer column. I guessed D and J the rest of the way down. Okay, and I got +7. I got 7 additional questions right. So what was a 36 ended up being 43 out of 60. And a 43 out of 60 on the, I forget which test, maybe 72C I think I took, was a 27 on that math section. So again, guys, the whole point of this exam is not to take this test like you would take a school test. In fact, take it exactly the opposite, because a school test and this exam have nothing to do with each other. In school, we're always based on percentages, unless you've taken a number of AP classes, and even then, going back to kindergarten till now, through 11 grades, you would have taken 100 classes, and at most, through those AP exams, at most you would have taken maybe 8 or 9 at most classes. At this point, that would be a scaled class, like an AP class would be. Otherwise, every other class that you've taken would be based on a percentage, right? You'd get a 30 out of 40 on your English test, and that would be a 75%, you'd get a C. Very rarely do we have this scaled scoring in school, and so that's what, we're fighting in introducing this, and even when we introduce it, like when I introduced this with companies that I used to work for, it like didn't register for some reason, even though it's a mathematical certainty. We try, as much as I can in these videos, I try not to say anything that is not objective, right? That is subjective. If it's subjective, like I never try to say that one strategy is better than the other, right? If one strategy is working for you, if you're getting a 36 using a reading strategy that's different than ours, then don't listen to me, right? Why would you change that up? So anything that's subjective, like a strategy-based thing, I will never criticize anybody or even say anything negative about, especially if you're doing really well. It's amazing to me that like people will say things like, oh, well, you got to try it this way. It's like, well, that person got a 36 and you got a 34, so maybe you should try it their way, right? But somehow that doesn't register. In any case, when we see this stuff, I try not to make any subjective comments during these videos, and I only try to be as objective as possible. And objectively speaking, and again, it's like a range. It's not exactly 28 from scale to scale, but let's say it's a range from 27 to 29 from scale to scale. You are guaranteeing yourself a 27 minimum score on the reading section on any recent scale as long as you answer 30 questions correctly. And that's 75%. Okay, so yeah, and so Sarah just made a great comment. And again, Sarah's a great example of this. It's part of the reason that I wanted her. She's a relatively recent, last 2 or 3 years ACT test taker. Sarah scored a perfect 36 on the ACT. She's the teaching assistant in the comments section right now. And Sarah is somebody that I like to reference a lot in these different videos, because she was somebody that Sarah's probably a better math student than I am right now, to be honest. But despite knowing that, and despite knowing that she could probably be teaching me the things that I was trying to show her, instead of focusing on her math ability, all I was doing when we were talking about this stuff and when she was chiming in on these videos was, Sarah, how do we get to a mindset that you don't have to go into the test thinking that if you don't get a 36, then you're a failure? That's the only thing I want you guys to be thinking about. How do we get to a mindset where not thinking about a 36 it makes you feel like a failure? That should never be the thought. Okay? Does that make sense? This should never be a thought that you guys have to go for a 36. Instead, go in thinking, okay, I want to answer, if I've tested a number of times on the reading test, if I've gotten a 33 consistently, then that's my floor score. So that's what I want to get on this test on Saturday or in September and October, whatever. Okay, that's my floor score. And so going into the test on Saturday, all I have to be thinking about is I can skip 4 questions. I could leave 4 questions blank, and this is true of most recent reading tests, and I'll get a 33 on that reading test. Now, does that mean that you have to stop and take a nap when you get to 36 out of 40? Absolutely not. If you're having a great test day, then that's how you end up going from 36 right to 30 to 40 right. And that's how you end up getting a 36, and that happens way more often than not when you take that stress away and you're just like, oh, I can skip 4 questions. Right? This is a 36 question test with 35 minutes. Rather than thinking about like if I don't get a 36, I don't get into my goal school. Well, why don't we start with a 33 as your floor score? Make sure that you hit that, and then if you have a great test day, then great. Now you get your 36 and we're off and running. Can everybody give me a thumbs up? Everybody that's watching, can you guys give me a thumbs up if that idea makes sense? That the biggest thing you can do between now and Saturday, the thing that's going to affect your overall score more than anything else, and that includes any amount of concept review you guys do. You could read as many reading passages as you possibly can. But realistically, if you understand how this scale works, okay, if you guys understand how this scale works and understand how if you set a goal score for yourself of 36 and you leave 4 questions blank, it's really not a 33. I shouldn't say that, right? It's not a 33. It really is a 34 minimum because you guys are actually going to guess on those last 4 questions that you left blank that you ran out of time for. And so at a minimum, I shouldn't even say, if you get 36 questions right, now all of a sudden you're actually at a 37, you really would be guaranteeing yourself a 34. Because guessing a 1 answer choice down for those last 4, you definitively get at least one of those questions right. This is 74F, guys. Sorry. Yeah, this is the scale for 74F. Is that cool? All right, so let's keep going, guys. Any additional questions about the scale before we move into talking about the ACT English section? There's really not too much to talk about for ACT English, but we can. In fact, let me just get this video queued up. If you guys have any questions about the scale, let me know. Otherwise, again, guys, we're trying to keep it pretty structured for the video today, just so that we can continue to move on. Guys, so let's talk about the English test. Let's talk about ACT English. Again, guys, we're going to be using the 74F test. So 74F, I don't know why I switched off this. 74F. Sorry if you guys are going to get a headache from this. I think we've posted it. I think we posted it in the description. But if not, let me know. So this is a video we did it last time, and I'll post this video. So guys, if you want to follow along with 74F, yeah, so guys, on English, so English is the, yeah, guys, let's talk about English. On English is the one section in terms of the scale that I really don't think you need to worry too much about it. You do, I mean, it's true that you only have to answer, I mean, this idea of sacrificing questions, right, is still appropriate and still available, even on the English section. But English is the one section that I'm convinced that if you really put in the hard work and put in the effort, that anybody that's watching this right now could score a 30 plus on the English section if you put in the hard work. So we filmed a video a few days ago that I think that if you're looking for some English help or what you can do in the next 2 days to help you with English, it's to focus on punctuation. So I just ECT English video, focus, punctuation. I'm posting this in the chat. And then Sarah, would you mind just posting it in the comments below the video so that whoever watches this after has the opportunity to look at that? That video will walk you guys through all of the lessons that that are actually the most common on the ACT English section. And so that, and again, actually this is actually probably a good point to bring this up. For those guys that haven't used StarU, if you guys haven't used the StarU app yet, give me 1 second here. If you guys haven't created a student account on StarU, I highly encourage you guys to do that. Do that tonight. Again, somebody made the comment about not having too many questions. Guys, we're in the process. In fact, Sarah's in the process as a kind of a project here. She's in the process of uploading additional chapters additional chapters and more questions on the app for you guys to go through. But in any case, at least most of our tutorial, especially the most common themes of our tutorial, is on the app. So if you guys don't have a StarU student account, I highly suggest you get one. And then if you go into ACT, okay, if you guys go into ACT, and then you click ACT English, okay, you have all of the main lesson chapters right here. So as we talk about this, again, it's just StarU. You can find it, you can download it in the App Store on Google Play, and it's free. If you guys look, so Taylor, it's a funny comment. She said she hated subject-verb agreement. And then you just go do more subject-verb agreement. Again, I get it that none of you guys at 16, 17 years old are going to wake up at any day being like, I can't wait to watch that video of Chase talking about ACT today. Right? Nobody's doing that. I appreciate it for those that have been sticking around and watching these videos a lot. I really appreciate the support that you guys have made. It makes me want to do more videos. But nobody, I'm not crazy. It wasn't that long ago that I was in high school. I'm not crazy to think that you guys are waking up every day just can't wait to get to this video. So having said that, you gotta have this mental willpower to be like, if I don't like doing this or that, how do I make myself do a few questions each day? And you guys can just go through this and read through these example questions. Okay, does that make sense? Can everybody give me a thumbs up? Again, it's very easy to download and it's free. So when part of the reason we're doing these videos is to try to give you guys as many opportunities as you can again, one of the things that we're trying to do is to give you guys as many opportunities as we can to have this available, right? Accessibility, making sure that it's equitable for everybody who wants to study. If you guys want to put in the hard work, then I'm right here with you to put in the hard work too and help you guys. But it's whoever's going to put in the hard work. I don't want to be doing these videos for somebody that shows up an hour before on a Friday night being like, well, what am I supposed to do on this? Right? It's the people that have been putting in the time and the effort, and this is great. Allison, yeah, awesome. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. It makes me it makes me want to do more videos. If you guys feel like that these are useful and that you guys are following along, I really appreciate it. It definitely makes me feel like that we should continue to do them. Okay, but in any case, guys, let's talk about this. So I posted that video. Sarah's going to post it in the comments section for you guys. But I posted the video that deals with each of these, right? That deals with the most common types of questions. Okay? Stop playing. That's pretty funny. Taylor, that's pretty funny. Okay, so I stopped playing. We posted the video. Sorry, now I'm trying to read these comments while I'm going through this. So guys, I tried to go through this right in that video that we just posted, and Sarah's going to post it in the comments section, detailing that punctuation, and maybe like subsidiaries of this would be what we call run-ons, if you guys remember run-ons, and if you remember fragments. But what I want to continue to communicate and why we're doing these videos and why we're releasing all of this content, okay, why we're releasing these is so that you guys recognize that punctuation is a concept that's being learned currently by like 5th graders. And that's not a knock on you guys, right? If you're struggling with punctuation, that's not a knock on you guys. It's to say that this can be learned. That somebody in the American education system said, hey, 5th graders can learn punctuation, so I'm pretty sure that you guys can review this stuff. And it really is just based on who wants to put in the time and the effort for the English section only. There are other things that you have to be doing for the other 3 sections, but for English only, I am thoroughly convinced now that we've seen enough students that the ones that put in enough time and effort will get a 30 plus on the English section because we're dealing with basic grammar. If I again might be too old, but if you guys remember that there's that Schoolhouse Rocks video that's like conjunction, junction, what's your function? And again, I always say this in our videos, but it's a good thing I'm not a professional singer. But right, if you guys have seen that Schoolhouse Rocks video, and some of you may have, some of you may haven't, that's like a 5th grade video that from the 80s, animated video that they used to play. Or if you remember, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. Does anybody remember those, or am I that old? Okay, but again, those are like 80s videos that are shown to 5th and 6th graders to help them learn conjunctions. And guess what? Punctuation is a major piece of that conjunction. Run-on sentences, okay? Run-on sentences are dealing with punctuation, are dealing with fanboys conjunctions and comma usage. So again, the thing that I want you guys to, I want to make everybody, I want these videos to empower everybody to say, you know what, I can do this. If I have the work ethic, if I have the desire, I can do this today. And if I don't, then I don't know what to tell you. Like it's like that thing that we get with some students that are like, well, I don't like to read. Well, it's like, well, I don't like to do a lot of things, but I know that reading is going to help me tremendously on this test. So there's got to be some kind of type of disconnect. You got to figure out a way to make sure that you read more. It doesn't have to be the most boring books in the world. Don't go sit down and think that you have to read Gulliver's Travels, right? If you love sports, go read ESPN. If you love plays, go read a synopsis of a play or go read the play, whatever it is. But don't you got to be putting in that time and the effort. And again, when you guys see, so this is the other thing that I'd say, particularly if you're going to take the test in September and October, when you read, so if you guys are big readers, okay, if you guys are big readers and you open a book and you say, or you open anything, right? You got to remember that is edited, right? That's an editor edits that book. So every time you read, you are seeing proper punctuation as you read. Does that make sense? 95% of published material, 95% of published material has proper grammar. And so there's a huge benefit to reading. And again, I've said this in other videos that one of the major benefits that I had as a kid that I really lucked out on because I did not have a strong work ethic was that I've always loved to read. I read everything, I read every day, and I read a lot. And so when I got to the ACT English section, a lot of this stuff when I was a high school student, I didn't think of it in the way that I think of it now. I just had seen so many examples of published work that I knew that like, oh, that comma shouldn't be there based on some intuitive thought, but it wasn't just there when I was born. It was because I've been reading so often, and that's where that can help so much. And then it will also help you obviously on the reading section. Okay, so you guys keep going through. Yeah, Chloe, absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep making these videos. I think it's going to be kind of a crazy time leading up into the September and October exams because Nate, I think, somebody mentioned earlier that there's so many tests in September and October. So we'll see where it goes. But if the time September and October rolls around, if we're in a position where I can just make these videos constantly all day, that's what we'll do. Okay, let's see. Any other questions here? Guys, can everybody give me a thumbs up on the English section? This is one that we really can. Okay, guys, sorry. Yeah, so mostly, yeah. So if anybody's confused about this, English, right, is very straightforward. It's grammar rules. It's focusing on grammar rules, punctuation, run-ons, fragments, right? If you guys watch that video that we posted and that Sarah's going to post in the comments section, you guys will just see how to tackle punctuation questions. And generally speaking, and again, this is for students that are taking the July test. If you're trying to make kind of a big jump here in the next 2 days, I highly recommend focusing on the punctuation chapter because you can get 10 to 12 questions right just focusing on punctuation. 10 to 12 out of 75, right? That's between 10% and 20% of the overall English test. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, so that's what I'd focus on. Again, as a comprehensive review before the Saturday's test, I'd focus on punctuation if I'm going to focus on anything with English. Okay? Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about math. Again, English is typically the one that we spend the least amount of time on because we don't really have a strategy for it. The strategy really comes down to like who wants to memorize comma rules, and if you see a comma and the answer choices are in the question, you know it's a comma question. And then you go back. If you see a verb underlined, it's a verb tense or a subject-verb agreement question. Who wants to go memorize that stuff? And the person that I said it in a recent video that like when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's the type of mentality that you have to have when you have to sit down and memorize subject-verb agreement questions. Yeah, guys, Sarah just posted a great comment. Sarah just posted a great comment about reading the full passage, or about whether or not you should read the full passage on English. And guys, let's move to math. Okay. So guys, I do the same thing. So Taylor, just real quick on English, just to conclude, Sarah and Taylor, regarding those main idea questions, I think we're all kind of in the same boat there that I tend to skim over. I'm not really reading to really read like we do on the reading section. I'm just kind of skimming over in the same way that you guys are to answer those reading questions. Or to answer the English questions for the main idea, like should the author delete this? Should the author add this? I think you guys are good to go. All right, so let's talk about math here. For those that are following along on Reddit, we talked. Somebody, I think it was Anna, who posted the math sacrifice thing a couple days ago. Okay, so math sacrifice, guys. This idea of math sacrifice is this idea that you want to try to answer questions that you 100% know how to do. And again, we posted this, but there's a way. There's definitively a way that if you answer 36 questions, I talked about this when we were talking about the scale earlier. If you answer 36 out of 60 questions, right? I just did this. We just posted a video on this. If you answer 36 out of 60 and you are definitively 100% accurate on those 36 questions, you can get a 27 on the math section. Okay? If you get 45 questions right, if you answer 45 out of 60 questions right, you can definitively get a 30 on the math section. 45. Again, in school, and this is what we're constantly battling in terms of making you helping you guys change your mentality for a test like this. It feels like a 75%. How many of you guys would go home if you left 15 questions blank on your math final? How many of you guys would go home, or if you left 24 questions blank? How many of you would go home and if your parents asked you like, "Oh, how'd the math test go today?" How many of you guys would leave 15 questions blank and be like, "It went so well. In fact, it went so well that I got a 95%. Boom. I answered 75% of the questions, I guessed on the last 15, and I got 95% on the test." Right? People would think you were crazy, but somehow the ACT, that's how the ACT scale works. Okay, so again, if you guys can be accurate, and this is what I want to convey, and it's so true of math, and it's even more true of science. If you guys can go into the test being like, this is a 45 question test, and it's in 60 minutes. Right? This is a 45 question test, it's 60 minutes long. It's not a 60 question test. Right? Set the expectation so that you don't go in with this mindset of like, I have to get a 36, or how do I get to the next question? Instead, for those that watched the math video yesterday, you guys noticed that I was just jumping around, kind of looking around, being like, oh, that's a triangles question. That looks pretty nice. Right? Let me try to answer that one. And that allowed me to get 36 questions right, and then I guessed. For those that want to watch the video, I don't know where we posted it. It's on the channel somewhere. But we guessed on 24 of the last 60 questions by simply looking at the least used answer choice. And I actually plugged it into the bubble sheet so you guys could see how easy it was to identify the least used answer. It's way easier than you think. Like off the top of your head, you're like, am I really going to be able to do that? And it like becomes pretty apparent, at least the least two. And if you choose either of the least two used answer choices, you're still going to do well. We used the least used answer choice. Okay, and again, this is what I want you guys to be thinking about. And ended up getting +7 by guessing D and J. And again, that ended up being 36 out of 60 is not a 27. But when you use that guessing technique effectively, 43 out of 60 on the 72C test, that was a 27. So can everybody give me 2 thumbs up or a thumbs up in the comments section if this idea of skipping questions, this idea of going into the test, it has to be as you go into the test. And again, as I was a student, I was a horrible, horrible school student. I turned everything in late. I didn't care. I never thought about the next day, let alone college. Okay, and so I was a horrible student, but I never had any stress. It wasn't because I was a horrible student because I was a pretty good kid. I wasn't intentionally trying to be, trying to turn in things late. I just was so relaxed and stress-free about everything. And I was like, oh, it'll probably happen. Something will happen. And that's a horrible mentality for like 95% of the things you do in your life. But on a test like this, I would go into the test just being like, well, I'll see how many I can answer. And if I don't like to do the question, then at least I can go get Chipotle after this. Right? That was literally my mentality as a high school student with pretty much everything I did. And on a test like this, because of some things like I've said this, my mom being a math teacher and me being a big reader, those 2 things alone could carry me to a great score on this test. And because I was stress-free, I was just like, well, I'll answer as many as I can. I knew from the get-go that I only needed to answer 54 out of 60 questions in order to get a 34 on the math test. That was just ingrained in my mind. I thought about it. I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And so then when I'd come across a question like permutation, I still to this day have not memorized how to do a permutation problem because it just never mattered. That's not a good thing for me to say as a tutor or as a teacher, but at the same time, it's like hopefully that resonates with you guys to say like, I don't know everything. Right? If anybody's being negative towards you about like, oh, you didn't get a good score, whatever, just honestly, it's just so brutal when people do that. It's like, I don't know everything. You don't know everything. That other person doesn't know everything. So just do your best and give it everything you got on the questions you know how to do. The only time I would ever be disappointed in somebody is if they said, I'm going to go in and do 45 questions, and then they decided to do 60. Because then they just wouldn't be following what would be mathematically or statistically the best way or the best way to take the exam. Okay? Yeah, so yeah, Amkar, that's right. So I spent 10 minutes on question 50-something on last test because I forgot the law of cosine. And that law of cosines, right, that whole idea, somebody said something about like spending 20 minutes on the first 30 questions and then 20 minutes on the next 20 and then 20 minutes on the last 10. That doesn't make any sense to rush through the first 30 questions when those are the same value. You don't get any more points for answering number 60 than you do number 1. Number 1 is infinitely more important as a question than number 60 is. Infinitely more on every level of the test. So question number 1 should be, you should be focused on not making any simple mistakes, 45 questions. And Amkar, honestly, the fact that you realize that going into the test on a practice test and not the real thing, now you're like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. And that's the best thing in the world. That's where practice pays off in such a major way. Okay, so that's great. All right, guys, the math questions. So again, we did a pretty extensive math video. I can post that. We did a pretty extensive math video yesterday, so let me just post that quick, and then we'll move on from math. That's really the only things you need to be thinking about in terms of the kind of this review aspect. But here's the math video from yesterday, talking about math video discussing important concepts to review, I guess. Oh yeah, well I'm right. That's an even easier way. That's funny. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that I said it was a practice test, but honestly, in some ways, if it was a real test, now you'll really never forget it. Right now, you'll be like, just like you said. I mean, you still remembered exactly. You remembered that it was somewhere in the 50s. That it was a law of cosines problem. You spent a ton of time on it, and this is 8 months later now. So to that point, when you get a chance to take the test again, you'll just know not to make that same mistake. It's a great learning experience. Yeah, how much Algebra 2, guys? Yeah, there's a ton of Algebra 2. There's a lot. There's more than Algebra 2. I would focus on geometry. Not to say that there's probably equal geometry in Algebra 2 on the math section, but the math and science, the geometry versus Algebra 2 sections, geometry is rules-based. So in terms of practicing Algebra 2, I absolutely would. There's a huge component to that in terms of the test. Probably 20 questions are Algebra 2, 20 questions are geometry, 10 questions are just easy overall, either basic algebra questions or tables questions, whatever. And then there's those 10 like obscure questions that are whatever, permutations, matrices, like 10 of those questions. But 20 geometry, 20 algebra 2. The only reason I say to focus on geometry maybe more so than the others is just because it's rules based and it's those formulas are something that you can memorize today. Yeah, that's a great question, guys. Yeah, so let's talk about yeah, if you know geometry already, guys, like geometry, I'm in the same boat. I would much prefer to do the geometry questions than I would to do algebra 2 questions. And again, if you look back at any of the tests or any of the real-time tests that I've been taking, almost always the questions that I omit at the end are almost always algebra 2 questions, or like those obscure ones, 2 positive even integers. Like, who wants to do those questions? After doing 75 grammar questions, it's not like anybody wakes up being like, oh, now I can't wait to do those 2 positive even integers add up to 457. On Tuesday in March, if you divide by pi, they add up to 210, right? What's the 2 number? What are the 2 numbers? It feels like that, right? That's how those questions feel. And so I almost always skip those. James, great question in terms of how to identify them. The best way to identify, see like the sum of positive integers right here. That's a good example of one. The best way to identify questions, I think, at the end of a test is just to be looking for the terminology. So like right away, we should identify this as a trig question, right? Because it's sine squared x, cosine squared x. The best way I can relate to that right now, systems of equations, right? And these are chapters in the app. These are tabs and chapters in the app. Systems of equations, you know right away that that's an algebra 2 question, right? Or an algebra question. right? Median, right? So you're just looking for the one word that specifies what type of question it is. And guys, generally speaking, it is only one word. And so for anybody that's watched our videos in the past, one of the things that I look for when I do you know how we talk about this pass one, like you're going to go pass all the way through the test and you're looking for these easy questions. Generally speaking, what I consider an easy question, and I probably haven't communicated this well enough in the videos, is questions where I don't have to look very hard for what they're asking. So again, like sine squared, cosine squared, that's immediate, right? Now I know it's trig. Do I want to do it? I don't know. How good am I at trig? Median, I love median and mean questions. So I know I want to do that one. Systems of equations, I know what they're going to be asking on that question, or I know generally where they're going. Right? What is the period of a function? This one would be the easiest question ever in the last 10. While at the same time, the expected value is not too bad either. This is the craziest thing ever. I'll talk about that in a second. Like this one, right? Given a positive integer n such that, like, this would be a question that I would almost never do, even to this day. And whether or not I could figure it out is another question. But even to this day, I'm just like, this is just too much. I'm too tired. But in some ways, by not doing that question, I'm saving my energy for the reading and science test by not stressing over it. Okay, so again, bisects, right? When do we see the word bisects? Well, typically we see angle bisectors with this degree, so I know that's probably going to be an angles question. And so that's one I'd like to do because like I said, I prefer geometry. Just real quick, guys, this is completely beside the point, but on old tests, they used to do this where they'd give you the formula for the determinant of a matrix. Now they don't do it, they figured it out. Note the determinant of a matrix is just this, so that it would just literally be like k times k, right, minus 4 times 3. And they'd give you the formula. The determinant of a matrix is this formula. It's just AD times BC, and then the matrix is lined up like this. That's actually a really easy question to answer. They just don't give you the formula anymore. Because if you see that formula, it's like, you're just like, okay, so this I'm just doing k squared minus 12, right? So yeah, I just I don't know why they did that, but I just had to point that out because it's something that I noticed recently, and I'm just like, this is crazy that they give you this, that they used to give you the determinant on the test, and it was just like, then it was just basic math. And so for a number 57 matricy question, that seems ridiculously easy. Now they don't give you the determinant on most tests, on the very recent tests, but it's still a really easy question if you just memorize what the determinant is. So the determinant, this is the determinant formula. Okay, so that might be one if you guys are looking to, if you're already testing pretty well in the math section, that might be one to try to kind of add to your brain the formula, because it's not going to come up on every test, but when it does, it's a very, very easy and straightforward question. Similar to the what is the period of the function question, right? That's a very, very easy and straightforward question if you just remember it. Yeah, guys, if you use a calculator for the determinant, that's fine too. Yeah, if you use a calculator, that's totally fine as well. But because they haven't been giving you, if you have a calculator and you know what to do, then with the determinant, then you can use a calculator. Graphing calculators, right, will definitely have that functionality. But a lot of times, if you just know the formula, and this is true of a lot of the sections of the ACT, if you just know the formula, it's actually probably faster and easier to just not use it, in all honesty. If you use your calculator, it's just easier probably to plug it in. Okay, so is everybody good? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if you guys are good to go with the math section? Everybody good to go with the math section? We'll move on to reading. Cool, thanks Kevin, great. Okay, guys, cool. Yeah, by the way, I'm kind of in agreement with what you just said there, in terms of some of the obscure topics that the ACT math section brings up. I think it just gives everybody a reason to believe that this is based on, like, not based on general knowledge. There are components of the ACT math that I do agree with, that I like. So, how should you learn Algebra 2? Yeah, guys, Algebra 2, it's largely about just doing practice problems, to be honest. I mean, I know. So this is our SAT book. But for Algebra 2 questions, If you guys do have the book, or if you have the app, a lot of the questions, again, we're working on putting more questions and chapters in the app. We're pretty close. We have about 75% of it done, but I would just continue to do practice problems and read through the chapters, do practice problems. Algebra 2, just as a quick note, the most common Algebra 2 questions that come up, or the types of questions for Algebra 2 are systems of equations and inequalities. Those almost always come up at least once per test, systems of equations. And look out for the inequalities ones. For anybody that's also thinking about taking the SAT, these will 1,000% come up on the SAT multiple times. Factoring, and factoring to the sense of like, do I really know how to factor, or can I do basic factoring? Something like difference of two squares might come up. Another common one. Let's see, what else do we have? You might see something like, what else? You might see something, algebraic word problems, obviously. Those are just practice, and those are the ones that I always leave for that second pass, for those that have been following along in our other videos. Algebraic word problems. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Those are the big ones. So I just review those and just make sure that you're continuing to work through them. But yeah, guys, the ACT math, the reason the ACT math test is hard is not because it's actually really straightforward. It's not hard because it's straightforward. It's hard because there are so many concepts. It's just such a grind to memorize everything on ACT math that's really why that test is hard, is because it's such a grind to have to do it, outside of the test. But hopefully those help. Those are the 3 big ones that I'd recommend. Okay, reading test. Let's talk about reading. All right, guys. So the reading test. One of the things that I encourage you guys to do if you're struggling with reading, is anybody struggling? Let's see. We had a question. Okay, so I'm a slow reader, and even though I read a passage, I mean I didn't. I still read a reader. Yeah. So in terms of comprehending better, one of the things that I would highly recommend. And we did this in a recent reading video, which was a drill to see how well you were really comprehending. And so in order to do that, I don't know, I'm just deleting this stuff. This is from the video we did last time. Yeah, formula for the perfect triangles is the formula for the perfect triangles in that other video. And it's in the PDFs that we posted. So just check those out, just so we can keep going on reading. But yeah. Those are posted in that PDF for the perfect triangles, like the 5, 12, 13, that stuff. So yeah, first of all, reading is, there's 2 ways. First, I completely agree with what Kevin just said. I think if you read more, that certainly helped me when I was a kid with these tests. It helps me now. Reading is the test that I feel the most comfortable with, partially because I just feel really comfortable reading, and I do that a lot. So that's one thing that's one thing that you can immediately implement. The other way to do this, though, if in terms of just short practice, right, like immediate practice, yeah, so what Sarah just said is perfect. And one of the ways that you guys can practice this is read, right, that drill that we did in that last video, read to understand, right, read to understand, knowing, right, that you can't go back, So literally the drill that we have students do all the time is literally to read the passage, right? And then once you're done reading, you can't go back to the passage. And that's not what I want you guys to do on the real test, obviously. But what that does is it tests your comprehension. It tests whether or not you're really comprehending things, or if you're still kind of focused on the time. Because if you read to understand it and you take notes and there's no time limit, and this is also untimed, right? If you do that, then there's no reason why you can't get all the questions right. Even if you can't go back to them, even if you can't go back to the ones that involve line numbers, right? You still probably can answer those just based on the tone and the main idea from what you just read. Yeah, so Taylor, so what Taylor just posted, guys, too, is a great piece of advice. Part of the reason that the reading section went well for me back then and why it does now is because the reason I like to read is because I really do like to learn. Okay, I really like to learn, and as Taylor just said, if you need to convince yourself to read as if you're a scientist, if because you don't really enjoy science to begin with, then that's what you have to do. But part of the reason is because I really enjoy some of these passages. Like when they talk about, I don't know what these ones are about. There's one on, was it this one? This one wasn't too bad. I remember doing this one when we did that live video. This one was about, in any case, guys, I think it was about, I just enjoyed reading it. And if you enjoy reading it, it's amazing how, it's just amazing how much easier the test becomes, the reading test, because you're just so much more focused. And then when you get to these direct questions, right, so we talk about direct questions. Let me go to, oh yeah, this was the one that I enjoyed reading. Like this one was about, this is from 74F, guys, which is available to everybody, so 74F. Yeah, this was about Chu Berry, who was a famous jazz musician. I just loved reading about Chu Berry. And so like when I was done, I remembered, where was it? Like some of these questions, I just remembered them. So he was, even to this day, odd, haunting, and relaxing, right? You just remember those things because you're interested in them. And that's such those are all direct questions that if you really read and you read for content, guys, I don't want you to forget that this is 85 lines and it's double spaced, right? We have 2 columns here. And so it's 85 lines. That means it's like 40 to 50 lines of a Word document. And so if you guys stay focused on those and you just focus and you identify, like you guys, for those that have watched some of our reading videos, when I first saw the 74F test and when we did that real-time video on 74F, I was just reading to read. And guys, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that when I filmed those videos, there was definitely some anxiety that was coming along with me. I knew that if I didn't do well on those, it was going to look really bad on what we were trying to accomplish at Star Tutors. And so I knew that there was some stress, but even in that moment, you have to be like, I just want to read. I want to learn. And as Sarah said, trying to take away the fact that it's for a test allows you to do exceptionally well on this exam. Yeah, great question, Jonathan. Absolutely. If you guys like passage number 1, just for the sake of the videos, I always start with passage 1, kind of because I've done this long enough and I read enough that I know that even though passage 1 is going to take me the longest, I also know that I'm going to catch that way back up on 3 and 4 where I really do enjoy those. So I always, if it were me taking the test for real back in the day, and I probably did this, I would have started with passage number 4 and worked backwards. And absolutely, passage 1 to this day, the narrative passage, number 1 overall, the reading test always takes me longer than any of the other passages. But I just know that if I do it in order 1, 2, 3, 4, that I'll make up time on 3 and 4, and it almost always happens that way. Yeah, the fiction passage in this 74F test, I remember this. This was actually a pretty good fiction passage, which was about the kid with the time trials, I think. Yeah, so it's been a while since we've looked back at these, but this one was a pretty easy one. Or pretty understandable one. But yeah, a lot of times those fiction ones are like just too much. Yeah, so again, guys, as we've talked about throughout this entire video and as we talk about in all of our programs, the key to this entire exam is that it is a critical thinking exam where they're trying to throw you off your game. There is a certain level, and this is one of the reasons these tests are still so important to colleges, is because when you go to Harvard, let's just use Harvard as an example. I realize, I always say these in videos, I'm certainly not the Harvard guy, and if you're looking for Harvard and Stanford, don't look here, right? But let's just take Harvard as an example. If you take a test at Harvard, it's a 3-hour math final on a Saturday. That's actually how it is. That you take a general education math class, and you have to go to Harvard and take a Saturday math final for 3 hours. And so the reason this test is still so important is because they need to see, if you're amongst all of the smartest students in the entire world, they need to make sure that you're not going to get so overly stressed by the test when you actually do have to take not the same content, and you can argue content of the test all day long, and I would probably agree with you on some things and disagree with you on others, but the fact is that sitting for a 3 or 3.5 hour test is something that you are absolutely going to have to do in college, and that's where that ability to remove the stress, remove the anxiety, and to put that aside for a second, and just to think to yourself, you know what, I'm going to do the best I can. Today I'm going to give it my all, I'm going to give it my everything I got today. And if that isn't enough for my goal score is, I still know that I gave it everything I had. I removed the stress away. I read the test. I read the reading section because I wanted to read it, not because I wanted to get a 35, right? And that's ultimately what's going to do. That's going to keep you. It's going to keep you focused and keep you wanting to continue to finish the test, right? Especially if those last 2 sections, if reading and science tend to be your worst sections, your ability to find the easy questions is going to be absolutely essential to doing well on the test, regardless of when you take it. Okay? Does that all make sense, guys? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if that makes sense? Any other questions about reading? Any questions about reading? All good. What's Sarah said there? Yeah, so there you go. So Sarah said it too. Sarah, do you remember what passage order you did back when you took it? Do you remember what the passage order was? And again, absolutely, guys, that you should be ordering the passages based on how you've practice tested. I'm sure that Sarah and I would say that we probably didn't take the passages in the same order, based on our strengths and weaknesses. Maybe we did. But again, it's not. Underlining is great, Alex. Great question. I underline. You stay engaged throughout the passage. If you guys want to annotate, in fact, I'm a big believer, guys, that if I truly think. And for those that have watched those real-time videos of me taking the reading test, I truly believe that if I take 530, right, technically if you're going to try to get a 36 on this test, you have about 845 per passage. And again, don't set that expectation for yourself right away, right? Try to build into that 845. But I truly believe that if I spend 530 reading, there is no question in my mind that I can spend, what is that, 3? Good math, Chase. I can spend 315 answering questions. Because I know the reading and I trust myself enough that my reading was good, right? That I trust myself enough that I only have to spend 315, and then you just fly through the questions, right? A lot of these questions, a lot of these direct questions especially, will deal with something that's very straightforward. And if you trust what you read because you spent time reading it, right, you'll be in fantastic shape. Guys, yeah, great question. In terms of annotations, I always just do it based on what I see, what seems to be an interesting point. For example, one of my best races could hardly be called a race at all. I was a senior in high school, gunning to qualify for the national, so U.S. Junior National. I don't know if that's going to show up, but that seems like a pretty important event. That seems pretty big to me. The previous summer, I'd missed the cup by less than a second in the mile, and just the day before at my high school regional meet, I'd come within 3:10. So just the day before at my high school regional meet, that's a really close time. It seems like that's pretty important. Okay, I drove with my mother to the far side of Houston where time trial was being held, an informal, unadvertised. Guys, I love to circle adjectives. Okay, informal, unadvertised event. That adjectives, definitely circle or underline adjectives. That's huge. Okay. Kwame, yeah, absolutely. No problem, man. I appreciate you guys. Yes, if you guys want to work hard, I'll work hard with you. If again, I don't respond. For those that have seen me, I don't respond very well when somebody, who I haven't heard from or talked to in 4 months suddenly texts the night before, being like, "What should I?" The night before the Saturday test on Friday night, being like, "What do you think I should do tonight to help prepare for the exam?" It's like, I don't know, right? If you guys are working hard, I'm here to help. We're all here to help you guys. Yeah, does that make sense though? Yeah. So Sarah, yeah, did everybody see that? So I think. I don't know what I would have done in high school. September ACT, no ACTs will be taken at home in 2020, guys. It'll all be in person. They announced that, so all ACTs will be in person. Melanie, good question. Yeah, Taylor, great question about indicate tone of the passage, and they come up a lot in the questions, so look out for adjectives. Guys, one of the things that I would say is, but just look at this is the point that I'm trying to make in terms of subjective versus objective. I'm never going to criticize. Sarah just said she went 1-4-1. What'd she say? 4-1-2-3. Well, that is actually a pretty bizarre order, Sarah. But look, if it worked, Sarah also got a 36. So who am I to criticize, right? So Sarah got a 36 on the reading section. Who am I to criticize? She went 4-1-2-3. I think in high school I went 4-3-2-1. And again, guys, this is a subjective thing, right? This is totally subjective based on who you are as an individual. Okay, it has nothing to do with me knowing that passage number 4 is suddenly easier than the passage before it. Okay, does that make sense, guys? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if you guys are good to go with reading? Yeah, guys. So, yeah, the whole thing in terms of the individual sections as well. That's a good question. That's all been pushed back to 2021 as well. The ACT might change that policy, but they were planning initially to do the individual testing. Okay, they were doing the individual testing. It's starting in September 2020. but that's all been pushed back. Yeah, that's all been pushed back. Good question. They might change that. I don't know, but as of right now, that's the as of right now, it's going to be all in person in September. I think just because they're trying to catch up. Okay, let's keep going. Science time. So first of all, with the science section, we won't look at the scale for this one because this one's kind of. Let's talk about the science section. Couple things with science. Okay, science. I'm like I'm exhausted thinking about the science section because again, when you get for those that have seen that A11 test, if you guys haven't, I encourage you to do it. It's entertaining if nothing else because I'm actually dying at the end of the test. I applaud you guys for being able to do this, especially multiple times. The A11 test, when I got to the science section, I was like, my mind was melting, my eyes were cross-eyed. I was just like, dude, what is going on here? Right? So I took the A11 test in full one Saturday morning. And we live streamed it. And when I got to the science test, I was like so over the test. And again, it's that mental fortitude to push through. Honestly, if there's no question that in high school, okay, there's no question that in high school I would have given up more often than not. And so one of the things that I always tried to remind myself of in high school in order to get a good score, okay, in order to get a good score, I tried to remind myself to always find the easy question. Okay, always find the easy questions on science, and because if you guys remember this, the science section is the least structured. So can everybody write down this note? The science section is the least structured, and I'm convinced. I don't have any proof of this, but I'll just say it and acknowledge that I don't have any proof. I'm convinced that the science section is as much a mental fortitude test, which for those. Fortitude, which means how much can you withstand, right? How much can you withstand? Mental fortitude, endurance, right? I'm convinced that they put this on there as much for these two qualities as they have for any other comprehension qualities. Okay, so if you have mental fortitude and endurance, you can master the science test. But it takes focusing on the easy questions. So guys, Taylor, yeah, look at what Taylor just said. And again, I'm so glad that some of these are working beyond just what I'm saying, that I'm using these strategies. If you guys saw the comment from Taylor there, these strategies really do work. She got a 33 using this because it's not crazy, right? I mean, I'm literally saying on most of these tests to make sure that you find the easiest questions first, answer the easy ones, because the only time that timing really is a factor ever is if you're finally trying to get to a 36 on a specific section. Other than that, timing really doesn't need to be a factor. On the math section, on this math test, I think you could miss 4 questions and still get a 35. Well, if that's the case, that's 4 extra minutes that you don't need to worry about timing. Science can be the same way. Okay? The science method for the guys, yeah, so in terms of science, science 3 pass is the exact same thing as the math. It's just on science, we need to figure out which questions we're trying to identify. So science, right? So let's all talk about this. Science 3 pass. Science 3 pass. Okay, so on the first pass, right? On the first pass, we're trying to find all of the direct questions. Okay, all of the direct questions. Okay, where basically we're saying all of the easiest questions, all easy ones that typically begin with the words according to, okay, according to, or based on. If you look for these words, according to or based on, and sometimes they disguise them by starting out with words like suppose, whatever, and then you say based on the results. Sometimes they hide them in a long question, they'll hide them. Okay, but if you look for these direct questions, I kid you not, we just filmed a video on this, and for those that were following along, I made a bunch of simple mistakes, which is even more of a reason to make sure that you guys warm up before the test. But 25 out of 30 of the 40 questions are very easy, and I really mean that. I really feel that, and I try to be as honest with you guys as I can in all of the videos. Right? And everything that we say, we try to be as honest as we can. I really feel that 25 to 30, depending on how you feel about science, 25 to 30 are very easy. And then there's 10 to 15 that are pretty hard. 10 to 15 pretty hard. And I, again, am convinced with no proof, pretty hard, you spell pretty hard. I'm convinced with relatively no proof that they're doing this on purpose, that the lack of structure on science and just kind of the fact that it's last and that it's time, it's time sensitive. I'm convinced that they do this on purpose to see kind of who has that mental fortitude and that mental wherewithal. Okay? Does that all make sense, guys? Yeah, guys, in terms of the mask, so if you guys are taking it this Saturday, I think everybody's going to be required to wear a mask. I can't say that for sure, but I think that's I think that's definitely a thing. If not, though, I mean, honestly, guys, I think it's going to be a thing, but in certain areas, it really depends. And we said this I think somebody posted this from us on Reddit. It's really good, all of this, and it's not just with the mask, it's what tests are getting canceled. It's really going to depend it's really going to depend on where you are. Again, there's so many different policies around the country, so it's really going to depend on that. But don't try to focus on that too much. Again, kind of this idea of control what you can control. Bring it along with you wherever you're taking the test and just see what they say. And that's the best you can do. And then you're not worried about it. Okay, then you're not worried about it. So again, guys, when you see these 10 to 15 pretty hard questions, can everybody give me a thumbs up if it makes sense that we're trying to focus on these easier questions first? Does everybody see that? Okay, so make sure that you guys are focused on these easy questions first. And then if you focus on those easy questions, again, when we look at most scales, and the 74F test unfortunately is not this way, but on most scales, if you answer 30 questions correctly, right, you're already going to be at a 28 ACT score, a 28 ACT score. Okay, 28 ACT score. So guys, again, as you guys go through this, I want you guys to make sure that this component of your exam is the most important thing that you think about. Because if you just answer 30, if you go in on Saturday or whenever you take the test and you think to yourselves, okay, all I need to do is answer 30 out of 40 questions, I'll get a 28 on most ACT exams. Because again, it's not that 30 out of 40 gets you a 28, it's that 30 out of 40 plus the guess, right? Plus answering 3 additional questions. 33 out of 40, just like on the reading section, typically gets you a 28 on the test. At least a 28. Okay? Yeah, I'm sorry. I just saw that. So 30 out of 40 is not, and again, don't take the 74F test because this is a goofy scale. It hasn't been this way. I haven't seen this on many tests. But if you go into the test thinking, I'm just going to find the 30 out of 40 questions that I can answer, and you run out of time. Let's say you run out of time on the other 10 questions. Well, that's great news because on those 10 questions, if you're only searching for the easiest questions first, then those 10 questions were already going to be the hardest questions. Okay? So that's a good thing again, it's very, very important that you guys think about that. Guys, in terms of hypothetical questions, let me see if I can find a hypothetical question. This was from our video the other day. In terms of hypothetical questions, most of the time I do try to read very thoroughly, but it's, again, only after... so like if I see a hypothetical question and I read through it and I really don't know what they're talking about, then I do kind of go back and try to understand what so I use different words. So if a temperature 5 degrees Celsius had been tested with a volume of gas collected for zinc, more likely have been greater than 10, or greater than 107 or less than. If that's a question, I kind of need to go back and figure out what they're talking about here. Okay, and so maybe I'll read, and again, the benefit to this is that if you're moving quickly enough through the other questions, if you're moving quickly enough through the easy questions, for those that have seen the BO4 science video that we filmed, I had moved quickly enough through the other 30 questions that I really did have enough time on the first passage, which was wildly more difficult than every other passage in BO4. Okay, but I had enough time to come back and really read and think about what that first passage was asking, and then was able to get a lot of those hypothetical questions right. The hypothetical questions, and generally the science passages in general, aren't that hard. It's more of a fact that you don't have enough time to really comprehend them, but when you do have enough time and you've answered all the easy questions, then you can come back and try to understand it. And if you don't have enough time, but you've still answered the easy questions, you're still in incredible shape to get a 28 or somewhere between a 27 and a 30 on the science test, not even having answered any of the hard ones. Okay, does that all make sense, guys? Yeah, Isabella, great question. In terms of studying the day before, I try to do what feels best. But if you feel overwhelmed, right? If you feel overwhelmed, I would absolutely take a break. We have had students in the past that actually feel more anxious and more overwhelmed if they don't take a practice test section the day before the test. But that's a rare circumstance. We have had that happen before, where like I've suggested not doing anything on a Friday before the test, and they've been like, absolutely not. I got to do something. And so that's a rare circumstance. But for the most part, I think I would agree that if you take a deep breath and just take a break, maybe do a little bit of review, just minor stuff here and there, just go over a few formulas or punctuation, just something small that you kind of already know, but it just gives you some confidence or some reassurance. Then I would do that. Yeah, so exactly. You guys are saying the exact same thing, so that's great. Yeah, Ankar, great question. So in terms of skipping questions, that's the hardest part about this, is that there's no question that you are going to feel that this does not feel good to be able to skip questions, because we've never done this before on a real test. In fact, again, going back to our example before, when we skip questions on the real test, most of the time that just makes us feel more anxious, right? When we're like, oh no, this is not going to be great, right? It makes us feel even more anxious. The key is that if you practice, and again, it's going to be tough to do this before Saturday, but if you practice this and you go in knowing that this is the strategy you're at least going to use for the time being, and again, I've already stated in this video, in this live stream, that I don't know everything and I don't know what strategy is going to work. I think this strategy should work best because of the math behind it and the idea of answering the easy questions. But there is a certain psychological anxiety that comes with skipping questions, and it's one of those things that practice will help you overcome that for sure. Melanie, good question about the computer. If you're taking the test on the computer, guys, on the channel, we have the CBT test. We've actually gone through where I walk you guys through the computer-based testing. So if you're taking it on a computer, if you're taking it out of the country, check that video out. It's on the channel. Just type in like Star Tutors CBT or computer-based testing. And I actually think there's some advantages to taking it on the computer. Yeah, again, guys, if you can skip questions, you have to have the mentality. So anybody that's having trouble with this idea of skipping questions, here's the best way that I can describe it. On every test, if you get really good at this idea of skipping to find the easiest questions, on every test, let's say there's 30 questions, and science is what, 40 questions in 35 minutes. So I keep doing this, 35 divided by 40. So you get times 60. You get 53 seconds per question on science. You get 53 seconds per question. So anybody that's worried about skipping or that feels anxiety when skipping questions, 53 seconds, I mean. The thing that I want you guys to remember is that if you get really good at this skipping idea, and you're just like, and you don't even know necessarily if you're skipping good or bad questions, but generally you know when you're answering the right questions. If you have 53 seconds per question and you take, let's say, 5 seconds to answer those, or I'm sorry, 5 seconds to decide that you're going to skip it, you still are left with 48 seconds of what we refer to in our classes as banked time. Okay, you still have 48 seconds of banked time. And so the beauty of this is, yes, you cost yourself 5 seconds on that, but you also have 30 questions done. So, again, it kind of goes back. Would you rather have 53 seconds on all the questions, or have 30 questions answered knowing that you spent a little bit of time? With the last 10, you have 8 minutes instead of 9 minutes, right? For the last 10 questions, you'd have 8 minutes, but so that's the best way to describe it, and hopefully to release some of that anxiety, is that if you're going to skip questions and you get good at skipping, it only takes 5 seconds to skip, so now you have 48 seconds coming back for those questions that you skipped. So you have 10 questions at the end in 8 minutes, but you've already answered 30 out of 40 questions correctly. Right, and again, for those that have seen that BO4 video, it really does work. I promise it really works. Okay, guys, so can everybody give me a thumbs up if those general thoughts about the science section? Again, this review is designed to hopefully give you guys just kind of an overview or an overthought about what you guys are trying to accomplish here on Saturday, or if you're going to take it in September and October. Don't get down. Right? There's no reason to get down on yourself about something that you can't control. it's the only thing that's going to hurt is it's going to hurt your score come September because you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. That's fine. You don't have to prepare for the next 2 months just nonstop. Take a week off, right? If your July test got canceled, take a week off, take a deep breath, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks off even, and then come back and be ready to go and prepare for a month before the September test. And by that time, I guarantee you'll be ready to go. You'll be refueled. You'll have a clearer mind, and you'll just say to yourself, I can do this. But yeah, don't get down on yourself about something you can't control. That's so counterproductive to increasing your score. Okay, if you guys just take a deep breath, if your test got canceled, it is what it is at this point. And again, what we're ultimately trying to do is just trying to stay as focused or as positive as possible, so that when the test does roll around, when test day comes, you guys are ready to go. You're amped up. You are. In fact, we have that for those that are taking the Saturday test. We have that Saturday hype video tomorrow, or Friday hype video tomorrow. We did that for the June test. It actually worked out pretty well. But basically, that's just going to be a pep talk of me getting you guys fired up to take the ACT on Saturday. So I encourage you guys to be a part of that. That's the ACT hype live stream on the channel. If you guys want to check that out tomorrow, I think that's at 1 p.m. Pacific. We'll go for an hour. Okay. So guys, again, that's generally those are my general thoughts about the ACT. If there's anything that I'd focus on between now and Saturday, I would definitely think about the scale. And again, kind of going back to there just for a second as we wrap up the review portion of this, kind of going back to there, I think that if you guys really focus, and again, kind of forget about the 74F science test because it's goofy. If you guys really focus on finding your number, finding the number of questions you think you can answer accurately based on past practice tests, okay? Yeah, Taylor. Well, yeah, Taylor. So yeah, I mean, guys, this is great. This is all. So that's positive, right? There's one positive, Taylor, that's going in your favor. Use that. Don't. You're thankful for that and you're excited about that. Use that, and now get fired up, right? And now you're ready to go for Saturday. That's a good omen and ready to go for Saturday. 34 on ACT Science, guys. Yeah, so it's ACT Science. This is a bad test scale. For most ACT Science questions, tests, it's usually -1 per question. So I would say anywhere from 30, I'd say 37 would be a good number to shoot for in terms of getting a 34 on the ACT Science. 37, 34 ACT Science. 34 out of 40. Yeah, guys, so in terms of looking for easy questions, it doesn't, you'd be amazed at how much time you make up. You'd be amazed that when you struggle for time, if you had a camera on yourself in terms of struggling for time, you'd be amazed at how much time you can spend on one question. And this 3-pass idea is trying to eliminate any notion or any stress that comes around when you have one question and you just can't figure out the answer. You'd be amazed how you can spend 3, 4, 5 minutes on that one question. So again, if you had a camera on yourself and you watch and you figured out how much time you're spending per question on any given test, you'd be amazed at how much impact those one question out of 60. So really what this 3-pass method is trying to accomplish is it's really trying to give you guys the sense that if you answer the easiest questions first, or if you get to the point where you're not overwhelmed by any questions, then at some point you've already answered 50 questions correctly, and everything else is just icing on the cake. And that's what that 3-pass and those easy questions first mentality, that's really what we're trying to accomplish there. Yeah, so that's exactly right. So once you get to a hard question, you just stop. It's almost like a mentality, like you almost get to the point where you have to prove like that you can get it right. And again, on a test that's where every question is equal value, spending too much time on any question, or even recognizing that right off the bat, like sometimes we have students that will recognize that they don't know how to do a formula, yet they spend a minute and a half trying to figure it out. It's like you can definitely do that. That's fine, but at least get the other 45 questions that you can do anyway before starting to get stressed out by the one question and then not getting to the other 45 that you could have done. That's again what this is trying to accomplish with this pass idea, this pass method. Is that cool, guys? Guys, can everybody give me a thumbs up if this all makes sense? Does anybody have any general questions, any more general questions about this as a whole, about the test as a whole? Can everybody give me a thumbs up if everything we talked about in terms of the review, in terms of what I want you guys to accomplish, can everybody give me a thumbs up if this is good, if you guys are good to go? Again, for those that are taking the test on Saturday, this isn't the end of the line for our videos. Tomorrow we have our ACT hype video where we're going to try to get you guys all fired up and ready to go for Saturday. So again, if you're taking the test on Saturday, please join us for that tomorrow. If not, if you're taking the test in September or October, then just keep prepping, keep working hard. We'll keep putting out these videos as often as we can, and and you guys will get ready to go. We'll guys. Oh, one thing, quick question on ACT writing. Don't worry. So even if you're taking the writing test on Saturday, try not to worry about writing at all, especially if it's going to hinder. Like honestly, especially because even the UC schools, which are the kind of the last holdout of major schools to still consider the ACT writing section, they've even said we're not going to consider it again. So in terms of the ACT writing section, don't think about that too much. We won't do any tips in any of these videos on the ACT writing section solely because it's going to be less relevant. If you're a junior right now, if you're going to be a junior, it would almost be completely probably irrelevant by the time you apply to college. So don't worry too much about the writing, especially if it's going to be because it's always going to be an added thing, an added item to the rest of the test. And the overall test score is far, far more important than the ACT writing section. So that's we won't have any tips on that in these videos, but that's just kind of my personal philosophy on that. We wrote a book at one point, but guys, yes, the ACT writing section, the UCs were the last ones. I think there were like 10 that still required it as admissions. Now it's optional for most schools, but yeah, I mean, I think that by the time the whole test is optional for students that are going to be seniors, but I think by the time the junior class rolls around for college admissions, the writing test will mean even less. Experimental sections, guys. In terms of the experimental section, don't worry too much about that. They won't announce so it's random in terms of who gets the experimental section, so don't worry about that. You could have one, you might not have one. It's just depending on where the testing location. My guess is on this test, and probably on any test going forward, my guess is for the experimental stuff that you won't have the experimental test on either the July, September, or October test. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my general feeling because of all the stuff that's going on. All right, guys, so I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. We're going to try to keep producing these as much as we can. I hope this comprehensive review gave you guys some thoughts and some insight in terms of how you can approach the test on Saturday. We will have that additional video tomorrow where we give you guys the pep talk and try to get you guys fired up about the test. If you have any questions, as always, please don't hesitate to comment on the videos below. I should also mention, guys, that we just YouTube, because of you guys, because of everybody that's supported us and been a fan of ours. We just joined the YouTube partnership program or membership program, and so we have these structured classes where a lot of you guys are in those classes as it is. We have these structured classes, and again, this is just if you guys don't want to join, you don't have to, but for $19.99 a month, we basically are going to post all of our recorded classes with the homework. And it's a very structured plan. And if you guys join the membership, I think it's the gold membership, you guys then you'll have access to a full 20-hour program. It won't be live. It'll be recorded lessons, but you guys will have that going forward. So check out that if you're interested. And again, that'll be under the gold membership if you guys see that below the channel. So guys, I hope you guys have a great test on Saturday. I hope you guys join us tomorrow for that Saturday for that hype part of it, and let us know if you guys have any questions by responding in the comment section. We will see you guys tomorrow, or we'll see you guys in the next video sometime next week or in the next couple of weeks. Okay, guys, have a great test day and have a great rest of your night.